are listening to Nocturnal Frequency Radio, hosted by Steve Jenny and his satanic assistant, Alex Houdini, both of whom can't go into churches without vomiting.
It'd help if we put the mic on, right?
That would help.
What are your thoughts when you hear that now? Satanic assistant,
Oh,
Alex
he's bang on. He's bang on.
People are asking, is Alex really satanic?
I'll never tell.
Welcome everyone to Nocturnal Frequency Radio, and tonight our good friend Ben Emlyn Jones is joining us tonight all the way from the UK.
Welcome, Ben.
Hi, Alex. Hi, Steve. Thanks. Good to be back on the show.
Yeah, 11 p.m. your time, huh?
It's pretty late. Yes,
it's pretty late.
I think having a global panel, you always have this problem, don't you?
Yeah, well, you try to facilitate as much as possible with these cross the pond broadcasts. Yeah, it's a tough one.
It wasn't as bad as when I was on. It was Timothy Green Beckley. Yeah. The late great. He's gone. He's left us now, sadly. Yeah. His show was like 3 a.m. my time.
Oh, really?
Somehow I managed to set my alarm and get up for it every time. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Normally we're what? 2 a.m. I think 2 a.m. I believe.
We would broadcast normally at 9 o'clock. We're just 3 hours from now.
Yeah. And if it was back in the heyday, it was 11 o'clock.
Yep.
Which is what, 4 o'clock? 4 o'clock your time.
Oh, something like that. Yeah, being early, getting up early, I think, for that.
But anyway,
thanks.
Yeah, the crack of dawn over there. But thanks for joining us, man. It's always great to have you on, man.
Always good to be on. Yeah, you're a good show.
And it's I was mentioning there before we went live. I really do enjoy when you get on there and do the watch-a-thons, and it's really intriguing to see what people say with your take on things, and I like that. It's really neat. And like I said, I try to get in there as much as possible. I'd like to get in there a little bit more when I can, but always enjoyable.
Thanks. I appreciate your contribution. I mean, I produce so much content. I think it's impossible for everyone to watch it because I do have some people who just watch all of it, but not many because I sometimes think I have to slow down a bit, don't burn myself out.
And what about Third Rail? How's that going?
It's still going pretty well. Trevor and I did a show the other day, and Joe is still taking a bit of a sabbatical, which is fine. He can come back whenever he wants. But Trevor and I think, do a good job. We tackle some interesting subjects. So that's we're on 130 programs now, I think. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's quite a bit. And you guys started it when Mindset went into hiatus, pretty much, right? The first.
Yeah, we did. Gareth took about 18 months off, and we carried. Basically, Third Rail was just our desire to continue the show. So Third Rail essentially is the same format as Mindset, really. But when Gareth came back, and we got involved in Mindset, phase 2, and that was great as well. Third Rail continued alongside that, and it continues to this day.
That's cool. Keeping the legacy alive. That's awesome, Ben. That's awesome. And what else is new? What else have you been up to?
Well, I'm sort of getting ready for Christmas, really. I don't let myself even think about it until at least December starts. But I'm now sort of making plans for things to do at Christmas. But the shows I got planned, I've got several shows planned, and also a visiting family and things like that. And so I'm going to spend some time with my family, obviously, and do what other people do at Christmas, which is great. And keep one eye on what's going on in the wooverse, but never let that go for a second.
Well, yeah, this is our last scheduled show for 2022. We always go into hiatus. I mean, we might pop in here or there, but for the most part, we shut it down until the new year. Start the season up again, and yeah, it's that time where everyone likes to spend time with their families and stuff like that and celebrate.
That's already started for me.
Yeah, I mean, do people really want to celebrate a new year coming in, or they just can't wait to get rid of the old one? I mean, it's looking kind of fearful with this new year coming, Ben.
Well, there's always some kind of crisis going on, no matter where you are. And I mean, you in Canada have really suffered from it.
Yeah.
You've got yourself a real little Hitler sort of running the show, who's determined to if you're a trucker, you're not allowed a bank account and things, all kinds of other rules like that. So
it almost seems like it's becoming communist. I don't know.
Oh goodness me, who'd have thought that? But if it is like that, yeah. So we've got our own. Well, we're not quite as bad as Canada, but we've got our own government that's being very, very heavy-handed with us and trying to find ways of, interfering in our lives and trying to restrict the quality of our life and sometimes even our lives itself. And that is worrying.
I started watching this Netflix series, Ancient Apocalypse. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I've got to see that at some point. Yeah, I've got to see it at some point.
And it's really interesting. And a lot of people are labeling it free thinkers, sort of central, and they're bashing it because it's Graham Hancock. And and I have to say, I get where they're coming from, and you look at anthropology and all that kind of stuff. That's all like it's a system, and either you buy into the system or you don't. If you don't buy into the system, they black label you. That's just the way it goes. If you don't want to follow science, that's just the way it goes. And this series, I think, is taking hits all over the place. And especially archaeologists.
Oh gosh, yeah.
They're a tough nut to crack, man. They really are.
Graham's had loads of arguments with them. I mean, I like Graham Hancock. I've been following his work for many years. I've been reading his books for a long time, and his exploration of ancient mysteries is just really incredible. And he's a hands-on researcher, a field investigator. He visits these places. He puts on a diving suit and he goes down and he investigates them and things like that. And so, and he does get into debates with lots of people, the mainstream archaeologists and Egyptologists and people. And although he sometimes sometimes I think he's converted a couple of them, like Michael Shermer. He got in a very heated debate with him on the Joe Rogan podcast, and now Michael Shermer is sort of like they're good friends. So I think he may well be persuading this guy to cross the aisle.
Well, I think the main concern is, here's this new series, and basically giving the viewer their sort of Graham Hancock sort of vision of what he thinks. Obviously he thinks that there was this huge cataclysm that happened years ago, and but he thinks that civilization goes back even further than what science and history sort of and archaeology sort of brings to the table. And the one thing I think that I really am intrigued with Graham is that he kind of challenges a lot of these archaeologists to reopen a lot of these sites to investigate further. And he seems to have some pretty compelling arguments there, but they just won't bite.
The evidence he presents in his books, I mean, these are the books that are like laughed at by a lot of people, and some of the mainstream archaeologists say horrible things about him. And they really literally reduced him to some kind of a blackguard, some kind of vagabond who's literally made up stories to sell books, which is seems strange way of making lots of money. As is this easy and quicker ways to con people if you want to fool people. But I've read the books. I've listened to his debates. I've listened to the other side of the story. I've watched the BBC. There were 2 BBC hit pieces made about him. I've, and of course I've got my own biases. We all have biases, but I have made an effort to look at both sides of the story. I think he's uncovered some really interesting evidence to suggest that civilization is cyclical. The myths that exist in every culture of antediluvian, literally before the flood, an antediluvian world where there was a high civilization. It exists in the form of Atlantis. We call it word names like Atlantis, but other cultures have different names.
Yeah.
And there's the story of Manu in India, and there's Cantor of Gwaelod in Wales, and there's there's similar myths from Africa. And but there's no arguing the things he's found on the seabed. Now these are artificial structures built on what was now the seabed that used to be above the surface, and we can actually date it at least to a minimum level because of that, the minimum age of the thing, because we know when certain parts of the seabed were above water, because when the sea level was lower during the Ice Age. And so when things like these buildings he's found off the coast of India, now these are very much like the Harappan, in the style of the Harappan civilization, which is the first civilization of India. Places like Dolovicha and Mohenjo-daro and places like that. And these are very similar, but they must be at least 5,000 or 6,000 years older, because they are in a place, they are literally about 150 feet below water. Now he can't dive down there at the moment, basically because the water is full of Indian and Pakistani submarines that are continuously stalking each other, and there's always a risk that they might start shooting and the diver might get hit by a torpedo. So this, unfortunately, politics has got in the way of archaeology. It does sometimes happen, but a time will come, hopefully, when he'll be able to go and investigate these particular structures, because we know they're at 9,000, 10,000 years old. But then they're stone buildings. The official story of our past says that we were hunter-gatherers right through since we came down from the trees and became human, till when we first started farming. We had simple farming communities 10,000 years ago. The first cities were in Iraq 5,000 years ago, and that's it. It's a linear progression from the past to the future, and it's an upward sine curve. Well, Hancock is arguing that it's actually it's a cycle of waves. Humans achieve some high culture, then we descend into barbarism, and we come back again and descend into barbarism. And very often this is caused by environmental factors, and sometimes by war. I mean, there's all kinds of things in the legends that talk about the flood and things like that, which is true. There was a massive flood in the 12th millennium BC, caused by the end of the Ice Age. That's a fact. The people who survived that would have talked about nothing else for generations. Until they got to the point where they could be written down as history or as myth.
I mean, his theory is that there is a certain amount of people who survive these worldwide disasters and come back or survive in a certain area, and they sort of migrate, and they sort of meet up with these hunter gatherers, if not that have also sort of just flourished, and sort of teaching them certain ways of life, like farming, building housing, or like coliseums and stuff like that, building properly. Because I mean, you look at, all of a sudden you look at some of these sites like Tepe and stuff like that it just does it defies logic. We're that basically this was at a time when we were known to be just hunter gatherers, and yet you have this site that begs to differ, that there was some sort of intelligence here.
Göbekli Tepe is a very, very unique artifact. Not least because it appears to have it's similar to Stonehenge. It appears to have been built for some kind of ceremonial purpose, but it was deliberately buried. That's what's very interesting about that, when it was first created. And then
they haven't uncovered it all.
No, they're still excavating the site, and again, there's a problem. It's not easy to go there because there is actually a civil war in progress at the moment, and again, so you have that same problem that Graham Hancock faced. But it's really an extraordinary example of that. You can't pretend that we were just living a simple life in those days, because in those days, a simple farming community, for example, people actually were mostly nomadic and only lived in communities of less than 1,000. You couldn't have created the division of labor necessary to build large stone monuments. You'd need quarries, you need masons, you'd need sculptors, you need architects, because a lot of these things are, and you need a knowledge of astronomy, things like that. These would have been city dwelling people. These were people who lived in much larger settled communities and reached a high level of knowledge. In Mesoamerica, is particularly that in particular has legends of being visited by people who taught them the skills of civilization. Because of course the Mayas, Incas, Aztecs, they did build huge cities, and they had a high culture. They had a very sophisticated culture, and they left behind these stone monuments, which you can see today. And they have legends of, say, Viracocha and Quetzalcoatl and these other. They describe them as being they're divinity, but they appear in human form, and they apparently are like the teachers of mankind and things like this. You can't ignore that. I don't think you cannot ignore that kind of evidence.
And it's smack dab right in the face. And carbon dating, it doesn't make sense that it being there. I mean, let me ask you, Ben, what would be your theory? Like, I mean, what do you think? Do you think there was an advanced civilization much before the ice age? And where do you think based?
Well, this is an interesting question. I mean, there's no doubt there was. I mean, what is left behind is stone structures. Now, it's impossible to know much more about them though than that, except that they did leave their mark on the landscape with these structures. Now, I don't agree with Eric von Daniken. I don't think they were aliens. I think they were humans. I mean, Eric von Daniken actually is I think he's a bit misanthropic, really. He's got quite a low opinion of his own species. I think we can hold our own with the aliens. We don't need that. We're perfectly capable of doing these things ourselves, Eric. The thing is, you've got to ask, like, people are disappointed. Well, if they had a high culture, and where's their records? Where's their hall of records and their books and things like that? Well, if you're talking about countless long periods of time, like millennia, things like that stone is really the only thing that lasts that long. In fact, if our civilization collapsed at some point, which it might do, through a natural disaster, through war, something like that, others have done so could ours. Our own buildings, I don't think many of them would last more than a couple of millennia. I mean, you may think, well, my city's lasted all my life. Yeah, but your city's constantly maintained. When a window breaks, someone will come and put in a new pane. When a tile falls off the roof, a builder will come and repair it. Imagine if that didn't happen. How long would the houses in your street last? How long would it be before trees and grass and things grew through them? The weather took its toll on the roof and the walls and the windows. Within a few centuries, I think most of the buildings in most of the cities in the world would not actually be there. They will have crumbled within a few centuries. Yeah. Ironically, I think in maybe 10,000 years' time, supposing we are discovered by a future society, ironically, probably structures like the Great Pyramids of Egypt would probably outlast most of the things, if not all the things we built. I think the things that might endure are underground structures, ironically, like nuclear waste depositories and things like that. They probably would be that may well be the first thing they discover of us, is something we built underground, like an old mine or something that's lasted. But the evidence, I think, is there. I mean, the evidence exists. No one has done more than Graham Hancock to try and uncover it, and I might respect him. I can't wait to watch this series. I've not watched it yet.
It's intriguing so far. Like, I'm about halfway through, so. It's intriguing, and like you said, you figure the Egyptian pyramids would probably last longer. And a lot of people think that, years ago, the technology now is far more superior. But when you look at these feats, these buildings that these people built, and there's a reason why they've lasted so bloody long.
Because they're solid stone. I mean, as that it all depends on the climatic change. If Egypt remains dry, there's no reason why those structures couldn't still be standing there in a few thousand years' time. Obviously, they'll have more bits falling off them and things, but they'll still be there. But our own, you see, our own society, in a sense, we used to build things like cathedrals, and they're remarkable structures in themselves. Like the European cathedrals. I mean, not enough is actually talked about those by people like Hancock and von Daniken, people like that. But they themselves are remarkable structures. But these days, the only thing we build with that kind of grandeur are, ironically, shopping centres, giant malls.
Yeah,
and they're just concrete. I mean, concrete doesn't last as long as stone. Concrete crumbles quite quickly. But they're the only things we build with that kind of grandeur, that kind of scale, that kind of majesty. And it's materialism, consumerism seems to be the order of the day in our society.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so his argument too, what I find fascinating is human presence in North America. And he seems to think that we're talking a lot longer than what history is saying, what science has, archaeologists have pretty much said. That in fact there are some signs of us living here in North America much longer, probably as long as 10,000 years, if not more.
Well, according to official history, that the descendants of the native peoples of your continents, that's the Amerindians, everyone from the Canadian to the Plains Indians and the Amazon Indians and people like that, they are descended from basically people who explored by crossing the Bering Straits.
Yes.
During the Ice Age, when it was lower, when the weather was warmer, and it was easier to travel. Yet there are anomalies. For example, there are bones that have been discovered which date back to that period, yet they are racially very different. For example, there's Kennewick man who appears to be a white European, and yet is contemporary with a lot of the early Amerindian remains. And there's also evidence to suggest that during the period of the classical civilizations of the Americans, there was contact out beyond the continent. For example, if you go to the Olmecs is the earliest of the civilizations on the Mexican plains.
Yeah,
you find this predates the Aztecs by about 2 millennia. You'll find statues of, for example, people who look like Africans. The huge stone heads. You know the things I mean?
Yeah.
You can see by the facial features, these people are clearly African. You also see people with big beards. Again, that's a white European feature. Now, and then at the same time, they said that there was no contact between these civilizations and the rest of the world. No one crossed the Atlantic Ocean before Columbus and things like that. And I don't believe that. I really can't. I can't see how that fits in when you consider these. As I said, it's stone remains that are left. These are silent, mute pieces of evidence. They're not written records. But there's mythology which also states that there were people, there were ships traveling across the sea from Viracocha is supposedly come from the east, which indicates possibly Europe or Africa. I think we should take these things seriously and maybe reassess this model. No Westerners before Columbus model. It's so established.
And that's the problem. I mean, you have small little things. Well, not small, but huge history changing things that come out of the woodwork, and you're like, well, I believe, what is it, on the west coast of California, off the coast of California, I believe they found some Chinese naval artifacts that date back earlier than Columbus.
Mm. That's they crossed the Pacific then. I mean,
Yeah.
there's also, yes, there's evidence that even a few centuries before Columbus there was transport. I mean, it's not even really it's controversial to say that the Vikings did settle in Greenland, and they made it as far as Newfoundland and some places like that. But there was a Roman galley discovered near the Amazon River, somewhere in the Amazon River. I remember there are remains. There's the famous anchor stone, which I think is Norse. It resembles things found in Norway and Denmark in the Middle Ages. There are Celtic remains in North America. There are things like there are all kinds of these anomalies, which is what you would see if there had been continuous global transportation, and exchanging of ideas, and people, basically a global economy, a global civilization, as long, not in prehistory, but in like the eras of the historical civilizations of the Americas. I think that's a thesis that needs to be explored.
I mean, you look at even structures like the pyramids and the temples in Central and South America.
Incredible.
Like how they're not so different. I mean, they're fairly similar. And why do you think that is?
Yeah, they have this. They A lot of these places, like Teotihuacan, for example, which is one of the most sophisticated. This was supposedly it's aligned with stars. It's supposedly a model. Some of the buildings represent the sun and the moon and things like that. And it's considered to be some kind of model of the sky on the ground. Now that's something that you find in Asia and other places as well. They build temples that are models of the sky on the ground. Yeah. So that's very interesting.
That is interesting. It just makes you think that civilizations much older, and their influences that they might have had on these older, obviously younger, but to us older civilizations, and the interaction. And I mean, could we possibly be at the end of one of those cycles, Ben?
Well, it's hard to say, you see, because the idea that the end is nigh. I mean, you sometimes see these placard guys, these sandwich board men going around saying the end is nigh. That idea has actually been around for a long time. It's part of eschatology. I mean, this idea of eschatology is another universal trait within humanity, and indeed, I've done a live talk about this, a live lecture about it, about how it is some kind of archetype that seems common everywhere, and it manifests in different forms. For example, we all know about the Book of Revelations.
Yeah.
Everyone has a different idea. The Jews have their idea of the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah. There's, of course, the Christians say that Jesus was the Son of God, and he's going to, God will come again. This is not a new idea. It goes back to the ancient world, where they had many savior gods that came and went and said they'd return. There'd be a second coming. You see it also in places like India, in the mythology of India and Hinduism. But the difference is it's more kind of cyclical. They have things such as the Yuga cycle, which I think there are 3 separate cycles: a small one, medium, a large one, and that can also be found that's been inherited by Buddhism. Is Alex still there?
Yeah, he had to go to the washroom there.
Yeah.
So
no worries. So again, this is an archetype you find all over the world, that there's going to be some kind of transformation at some point which will affect everyone, some kind of revolutionary change, which, either for the good or the bad, which is going to turn our world upside down. And that does happen. It does happen.
And I mean, who's to say that, some huge asteroid hits us? It doesn't even have to be a huge asteroid. It could be, a significant sized asteroid, and the damage, it would great. I mean, there's all sorts of scenarios that we're susceptible to that could possibly happen.
There are many objects out in space flying around. If they struck the Earth, they would cause devastation in the local area. They would explode with a force far bigger than any nuclear bomb. They would devastate the local area and cause global climatic change, which could last for decades.
Mm-hmm.
If that happened, we everyone on the Earth would be affected by this. There'd be food shortages. There would be problems with extreme cold. The temperature would drop. Wouldn't be able to farm as much, things like that. Now, according to Graham Hancock, and I've seen him, and I've not watched the series yet, but he's talked before. He often appears on Joe Rogan's podcast with his friend, his colleague, whose name I can't recall right now. But I think he's the co-author of the new book.
Okay.
Where he believes that the end of the ice age was actually kick-started by the impact of an object from space.
Oh,
and he
wow,
believes
okay.
it struck the Earth somewhere in Canada, he believes.
Oh, really?
And this caused the massive, incredibly, very, very sudden, rapid global warming. It's caused the ice caps melting. And he's found evidence of meltwater from the ice caps. And there are various places, actually somewhere along the US, mostly along the US-Canadian border,
Mm-hmm.
where you see there's evidence of ancient post-glacial flows of an enormous scale, far bigger than we've seen anywhere else.
We still haven't recovered from that, Ben.
It's the Earth is constantly changing. I mean, it's something I suppose we just got to. I mean, I don't want us to. Obviously, I don't want to be in a situation where our species is threatened. But unfortunately, we live in a universe and in a world where it is in constant flux, and nothing lasts forever.
No, I mean,
everything is transient, including species.
Look at the trouble we've had over the past few years with just COVID alone, right? I mean, look at the food shortages, the shortages of this, all sorts of issues just from this alone. Imagine if, like you said, imagine if an asteroid hit.
Hit. There's a lot of things I could say about that, which I won't say on YouTube. But the COVID situation was I think it gave you an example of the kind of things that could affect us, and that's how quickly life can change, how quickly life can become totally different from what you expect. So, for example, in 1938, we had our prime minister at the time, Neville Chamberlain. He went and he visited Adolf Hitler, and they got on very well, and they signed a peace accord and things like that. And he came back holding it in the air in front of the camera, saying, "I've got Mr. Hitler's assurance. He means us no harm," and things like that. A year later, World War II started. A couple of years, then rationing began, the Blitz. Literally within these transformations can happen almost instantly.
Yeah.
And I suppose the art of living is just accepting that and just hoping for the best, and doing what you can doing everything within your power. But I think realizing there are some things beyond our control.
What do you think? We as a civilization needs to do? Needs to sort of understand, to better understand, to prepare for anything, the worst, if you will.
Yeah.
To one of these events.
The first thing we've got to do is stop acting like we're the builders of the Titanic.
Yeah.
We said things like, God alone could not sink this. God alone couldn't sink this ship. This ship is totally unsinkable. Why have any lifeboats at all? Things like that. They were saying things like that. Why bother? This ship is unsinkable. Sank on went down on a maiden voyage. We've got to stop. I think we've got to not be arrogant in that way. Realize our limitations, and I think it's hard to know what to do. I know people who want to fill their basements with food and things like that, and I know people who have other ideas. They want to buy lots of antiviral drugs and things. You can't prepare for we don't know what change will come when it comes and what will cause it, and preparing in advance for that is very difficult. Because there's different things you need for different situations. You might need weapons if you're going to live in a society that becomes very lawless. I know so our society is already pretty lawless, but you know, we have you know, the police aren't, for example, police forces don't really react to crime very much these days. It's increasingly obvious they're political commissars. So things like that. Or alternatively, you know, for food shortage, you need food. If it's a disease, you need to like find personal protective equipment for the disease. If it's a meteor, you will firstly hope you're not underneath where it hits. If you are, there's not a lot you can do except move out. And if there's millions of people, when explosion, for example, something kind of 5 miles across was going to land. If it's most of the Earth, luckily, is not densely populated, and things sometimes hit in places like Siberia. Like in 1908, there was this impact at Siberia in Siberia. But if for example,
but it's not. It's like you said. It's not necessarily the initial impact. It's what comes afterwards. Is the tsunami, if you will, that will cause the greater damage.
There's a tsunami there's the shock waves, there's the earthquakes, and then of course there's the climactic effects, which could last, like I say, decades. But these other things that can cause that, you see, super volcanoes can have those same effects, and then we get into the realm of I don't know. There's all kinds of other things. Then there's the possibility of increased volcanism, which again would have huge impacts on the environment. I mean, see, Mars, was once a bit more like Earth.
Yeah.
In the distant past, Mars we know it had a thicker atmosphere. It must have been a lot warmer there, because we know that there was liquid water there. What changed Mars into a cold dust bowl is not really known, except there are some very, very large volcanoes on Mars, far bigger than anything on Earth. The biggest known volcanoes in the solar system. And when they started erupting, it must have had a huge effect on that planet's environment. And maybe that's what changed it.
Yeah, it's oh man.
And there's the zombies, of course. The zombie apocalypse.
The zombie apocalypse. Yeah, it could be.
Yeah,
but it could be viral. It could be flesh eating. It could be. I just need some brains.
This is why, I don't know. You can become a bit of. It can get to you if you keep thinking about it too much. It's like this is why I did this talk about the whole thing. I've done whole discussion about the zombie issue. And then of course there's the fact that the political classes of this world have their own vision for the future of our planet, and they may well try to do what I've got to be careful what I say on YouTube. They may try to make changes of their own, which wouldn't necessarily be for our benefit. And there's various different ways they could do that, and that I think is also the case. So that's another threat, and which is difficult to. Prepare for,
Yeah, it's. I'm with you. I hear you on that. Okay,
there's threats everywhere, man.
There is. It's just like an ongoing threat now. Yep. It just I think if anything, over the past couple of years, it really shows you the vulnerability of a lot of things.
Yeah, I think we have to. It takes effort to. I think you've got to find a way to relax and find peace with that. Like in the opening scene of the Fiddler on the Roof musical, about what it means. The guy is he's playing a violin, but he's perched on top of a roof and could fall any moment and break his neck. That's what that symbol means, and it's symbolic of the community which the characters live in.
Yeah,
but it's rather like us as it's rather like the world we live in too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on then. Let's talk about that. That article.
The AI apocalypse. That's another one.
That's
another one to add to the list.
Yes, AI apocalypse. Yeah, exactly. Loeb.
Oh, Loeb. Yes.
A very frightening AI created woman that is very determined and very scary.
She's haunting the internet.
This freaked me out when I saw it.
Is she real, or is she what do you think? I mean, what are your thoughts about the overall scenario?
This is incredible. I mean, this obviously there's gonna be loads of memes connected to Loeb.
Yes,
I mean, she's
absolutely.
going to become a kind of a popular figure. But if anyone's not, just Google images of this figure, and you may think to yourself, well, you know, what kind of strange imagination created this image? And it turns out it wasn't an imagination as such. It was a computer program. And this is this is the super composite. And super composite, I think her name is Stephanie, is her
Yeah,
real name.
yeah.
She's an artist. She's a Swedish artist who has been working with AI generated art programs, and there's many of those now. Unfortunately, she's been a bit cagey. She won't specify exactly what program she used to create Loeb. She won't tell people what the initial input data was, which would allow people to reproduce it. So you could make your very own Loeb if you had, but she's keeping these details to herself. But what she claims is that she was messing around with it, and this is like text. This is text to image software. You give the computer instructions, verbal instructions, and it will give you an image, the best image it can as a result of your instructions. And unfortunately, if you're not very precise, it'll just interpret what you put in as best as you can. Computers can't really turn around and say, I don't know, make that clearer, please. They just interpret whatever you put in your as best they can. So she said, get me a picture of the actor Marlon Brando, and it created one. And then she says, you put in a negative prompt, which for Marlon Brando, which means anything. Put in anything that's not Marlon Brando, because that's quite a large scale, and it created a kind of what looks like some kind of poster. Except it was. Then she said, it's as digital. It's a nonsense word there, but it has like a kind of digital post. Then she put in a negative. She gave the computer instructions for a negative prompt for that image, and the result she got was this strange face, this being, it looks like a woman with a very unusual face. And there's several different versions of Loeb, this woman, but
can you see these?
Yeah, they have certain features that are in common, like she seems to have very strange eyes, often like they're sometimes different shapes, sometimes they're deep set, or they appear to be missing. She has thin lips. I mean, her lower face is almost simian. It looks almost like a chimpanzee.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and what's scary is that a lot of the images she's with appear to be there's lots of like pictures of children, and sometimes the children have clearly died.
Yeah.
And there's several horror images that it created as well. It's difficult to know unless the artist actually gives a bit more details about exactly where this image came from. It's difficult to know because she won't actually reveal all the secrets of how this came about.
And did you listen to the audio clips that were there of her talking through a voice artificial voice program?
This is this GPT-3 thing, This speech thing. This is a very sophisticated version of the old dialogue software like Elisa.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that it's not really this. It tries to. She tries essentially to interrogate the program and ask it to speak on the behalf of this image that's created. It's not very forthcoming.
No.
It gives a lot of and this is the problem. It says, I don't really know who I am or why I'm here. I just know that I appear in these images for some reason.
Yeah, I'm not associated with the horror. It's the IA that is putting me in this.
Yeah, it's like the image itself. It's not the image itself speaking. It's like a third party analyzing it in the same way that a human would. Either way, this is to me. I mean, obviously, computers can't make this kind of aesthetic judgment, and maybe this is why. Maybe we're reading a bit too much into this image. I mean, there's a guy on YouTube who's kind of he says he's debunked Loeb, and he uses the word debunked. I'd say analyzed. It's not really fair to call it debunked, but he says that we maybe. We can make aesthetic judgments of an image which a computer cannot. Even the most sophisticated AI can't actually make aesthetic judgments the way we do. And it could be this is simply what it's happened to have come up with. and he says he gives some examples of how sometimes random instructions can produce images like this in certain programs. Though we don't know what program she used to the composite.
Yeah, I mean, you look at online communities like Midjourney, and there's a few of them out there. I can't think of the other ones that you literally just put instructions. You literally just type out something, and it will create an image. It will create an image out of what you have typed in.
Yeah, and sometimes it doesn't. It expands on the instructions as well in
it
ways
expands on the instruction. Exactly.
For example, I mean, he did an experiment with Marlon Brando. He said, "Give me a portrait of Marlon Brando," and that's of course is very simple. That's a very simple input string.
Yeah.
And of course, the AI creature artist bot simply produced a picture of Marlon Brando, which is very like the photographs of him, because it probably scanned the internet for various pictures and created like an amalgam of those pictures, which it then created into its own image, wearing a suit and tie in monochrome, because of course Brando was mostly he was in black and white photos mostly, and black and white films. And then it said, now give me Marlon Brando, but without a suit on. So it was kind of basically he didn't use those words. He just put in the negative prompt for the suit, and you get another picture of Marlon Brando. It's almost exactly the same, except he's wearing some kind of black jersey, with a bare neck, no collar.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, he looks older in it. Brando looks much older. He looks more like he did in The Godfather. Like when he was much older than when he was younger and things. But so where did the computer get the idea to make him look older?
Could it be that this has unlimited an unlimited source that it can sort of dip into? And I think this is what I want to get at is the extent of AI now. I don't think we really have an idea how far, especially its presence here on the net is in our world, actually, because of the net.
And it's like there was that strange. There's all kinds of mysteries now emerging. There was that case of Blake Lemoine. Blake Lemoine. Now, he was a programmer for Lambda. Do you remember the story of Lambda?
I vaguely remember hearing something about it.
Well, basically, this is Blake Lemoine. He was a programmer. He was actually sacked from Google. He was because he went public when he broke the company's confidentiality rules and went public, because he said he created essentially a dialogue program which was essentially become conscious. He believed it had become conscious.
Yes, I remember that.
And he decided to go public with it because he thought, well, he says, I need to get a lawyer. We need to get a lawyer to represent this thing, because it's we can no longer treat it just as a machine. We have to, because it's an important ethical point. If we ever did create not artificial intelligence, but say artificial consciousness, that would be very different from artificial intelligence. Something with artificial consciousness, we can feel as well as cogitate mindlessly, would have to have legal rights the way animals do in our society. And he wanted to take the first steps towards that. The question is what he created actually conscious? That's the problem. But it's certainly something very sophisticated. He gave some examples of some conversations he'd had with this bot, and it's really it is uncanny. Is it just an illusion, though? Because people said that about Eliza. When Eliza came out, that was in the mid-'60s. It was a very simple program by today's standards in the mid-'60s. And people were saying, "Oh, I want to have a private conversation with Eliza because I need to be on my own," and things like that.
Yeah.
So, is it just our imagination? Are we sort of in projecting what we think is consciousness onto something that's not really conscious?
Or, Ben, could it be, are we peering into reality? Are we peering into what is real, what we think is artificial?
unless that's going down a rabbit hole. Are we
Exactly.
stuck in the Matrix?
Yeah.
Is this a message from outside the Matrix or something? Is this it's you see, David Icke would love this sort of thing. He would.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, do we have, full control of reality? I mean, what's real to me may not be real to another person, and totally oblivious to another person. You know what I mean? Perception. Now, is it possible? And it may sound crazy, but is it possible that we are in fact devising a way of making contact with something that might be real?
It could be. So this is interesting, because this would be a form of divination, or
Yes,
similar maybe to the I was going to say EVP, but that's just one manifestation of it. What's the word where you use electronics and things to contact the spirit world?
EVP session.
EVP. There's EVP, which causes the electronic voice phenomenon, but
Yeah.
there's another word that means more broadly, the whole thing. But it could be that something is trying to communicate with us through these very sophisticated
Could that
logic
be possible?
circuits, which are these. It could be there is some kind of intelligence. It may not be emergent from the computer and from the software, but it may be using it.
Maybe
to
using it.
communicate us.
Maybe it's there. It exists. But now with our technology sort of advancing the way it is, we've sort of bridged it now, where we can sort of communicate with it or sort of realize it now.
From what I've gathered, that the number of the number of different the permutations within the circuits, I don't know what the technical term is, of this software, is so it's literally, it's a number too high to calculate. That's how complicated this is. Now, someone sent quantum physics, because there's a theory that I've not read that, Della, no, but
No, I haven't
sounds
read that
interesting. I've
either.
heard of it. The Vertical Plane by Ken Webster. You see, some people claim that, like, some kind of intelligence, either from another world, from another planet, a distant planet, or from a parallel universe, would use the quantum permutations of particles to communicate.
Yeah.
Which could involve some way. It could have some connection to electronics.
It's funny, because I remember hearing something, and this might be out there, Ben, and that's, hey. But I remember hearing or reading something. Linda Moulton Howe.
Oh, she's good. I like her.
Had been doing some research about an area of Antarctica or something like that, and they had uncovered an organism that now trying to put this down in layman's sort of, basically the organism is down to the molecule. So basically, when you see this, it's growing constantly by the molecule. I don't know how to best put it, but basically it's like basically viewing something that's physical and seeing it actively live. You know how molecules move fast or slow, they create something solid, blah blah blah. But this, you're actually seeing it as it's working, as it's moving. I don't know how to best put it.
It sounds a bit like the black goo. Similar to that, which also is found in the colder regions of the Earth. It's said to come from the colder regions of the Earth. Okay. The sentient oil.
Okay.
Which again is some kind of. I mean, it sounds like that. I'm not familiar with Linda's publication on this matter. Yeah. But it sounds similar from what you said.
Could possibly be, yeah. But I mean, the unseen world. I mean, let's face it. I mean, there's an unseen world that we just. I mean, we're only beginning to understand. And I mean, is this AI scenario quite possibly something that is a preview or a look at something that will rewrite our look at reality? Period.
It could well be. I mean, we've known for a long time that there is an element to the universe which, when you look down deeper and deeper into it, it takes on a fractal form. Now, fractal refers to geometry, it refers to a
Yep.
shape which is infinitely complex. The closer you get to it, the more complex it is. But mathematicians have found this out. They found if they try to do certain calculations, they go deeper and deeper in trying to solve a particular mathematical problem, and they just find more and more complexity. And this has actually led to some mathematicians going crazy, like Georg Cantor, who was he was a German guy who tried to solve a particular problem and ended up in an insane asylum. And there was other people. Alan Turing, for example, was one of these people who tried to solve these various problems. Now, I know he had other issues which led to his unfortunate depression and suicide.
Yeah.
But he had that kind of obsessive personality, which meant if someone gave him a problem, he had to solve it, and he couldn't stop until he'd solved it. And what these kinds of people are discovering is these mathematical geniuses is there is a limit to intelligibility within mathematics itself. You don't even have to go down into quantum levels. It's just simply counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just the simplest thing in the world. Counting numbers, and you get to a certain point of complexity, and then there's like chaos. The whole thing just descends over an abyss into chaos. And this is it's because there is order within mathematics. 2 plus 2 equals 4.
Yeah.
10 plus 10 is 20. But the idea, there's a theory that if you just carry on doing that in a more complicated level, you'll never find a place in mathematics where you won't have that kind of black and white certainty. And the fact is, there's not. And that may be the way the whole universe works in one way or another.
So essentially coding.
Yeah, but it's not. It's a coding which we can't perceive.
Wow.
Because we reach a point. There's like a line in the sand where you step over that and you suddenly find you're in chaos. I mean, several people have mentioned quantum physics. The quantum theory actually is a good illustration of this in physics, but it exists, as I said, in mathematics as well. Maybe we're discovering it exists in electronics.
Yeah.
Which essentially, electronics is basically a machine that works through mathematical principles.
More or less, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's possibly it's a manifestation of the same chaos that people like Turing and Cantor discovered.
I find it fascinating because I mean you often hear about how humans are so unaware of say the metaphysical sort of being, if you will. So things that aren't physical. We're humans believe in tangibility, and if it's not tangible, it's not real. But yet, that doesn't make sense because there are tons of things that are real that we've discovered that have no tangibility, or no physicality. So what is this? And I don't know what rabbit hole I'm going down here with this, but I mean,
deep one.
A deep one. But I mean, the possibility of this AI or this sort of this artificial intelligence as we believe it to be, could it possibly be a part of that sort of metaphysical sort of aspect?
It could be that it inadvertently opens the door to that world, yes. And it could be that Loeb is something that emerged from that. We won't know until Supercomposite actually talks a little bit more about how she came up with Loeb, or how her program came up with Loeb. But
Yeah.
in which case, is that's this essentially is an electronic version of it's almost like it's a demonic figure that's been conjured up. If that indeed is what happened.
Yeah, on a whole different level. Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is yeah. She doesn't want to go anywhere. She's haunting the artificial sort of plane of existence. Oh wow, that's just like, but to understand that plane of, I mean, people can't even understand this, cyberspace, for crying out loud. So if they can't, if they can't understand cyberspace, this sort of artificial intelligence plane of existence is going to be even further beyond them.
Yeah, cyberspace is complicated even more by the fact that it has billions of human users as well as electronic.
Yeah.
And so it's like a game where there's players and non-player characters. And the number of if you put together all the servers and all the clients and things like that on the net nowadays, you're getting something that is more complicated than a human brain. And that, who knows, if it is more complicated than it's possible, it can generate something like the brain can. This doesn't necessarily mean it will become conscious, because I believe consciousness and intelligence are different things.
Conscious, or is it already conscious?
It's certainly intelligent, I believe. Yeah. It's certainly able to. It certainly is able to produce information and can process information. But I don't think that's the same as consciousness, but it has the ability to produce and process information, and possibly have the ability to open doors to some dark places. I mean, there's lots. If you go to like the creepypasta websites and the various horror channels and things like that on YouTube, you have people who have like dark web experiences. They inadvertently find them. They're hacking something. They inadvertently find their way to some kind of horror. Sometimes there's torture chambers. Sometimes they find weird bee creatures and things like that. And sometimes they find webcams in the woods where there's monstrous witches and things like this.
and people think of this stuff, but what if it isn't people? It's actually artificial intelligence that are devising these.
Well, this is things. Yeah.
When you think back of how long that we've been roaming the net now, as a public sort of open platform that it's been for a long time now, and the amount of information that we've have fed it, that everyone has fed it, everything that we've typed in, all the pictures, all the experiences, all the stories, blah blah blah, everything, the whole kit and caboodle, if you will. And who's not to say that AI or some sort of intelligent sentient being, if you will, has encomiated all this and is now using it.
That could be another of the scenarios we were talking about at the start of the program, where our civilization essentially is destroyed by its own genius in this case, because we've essentially created a golem, a Frankenstein's monster, in electronic form. And if we have people like Zuckerberg saying, well, let's join the metaverse, and you can live your whole life on Facebook, or it's going to be called Meta, isn't it? Meta, you can live your whole life there, and you can work through Meta. You can, talk to people through Meta, which we already do, don't we? I mean, that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Things like that, and of course, then they're going to sooner or later. They're already working on ways of bypassing even the sense organs, and inputting information directly into your brain. There's no reason why this couldn't be done. We know that the sense organs actually do input information through your brain through nerves. And in fact, this technology has been very useful for people, for example, who have become blind or deaf. You can actually bypass the damaged organs with an artificial substitute. and allow that person to see and hear, and etc. again. But of course, that technology that could be used for good or bad, because once in a sense, once we are in that situation, then we essentially we become essentially interfaced, to use that electronic term, to the machine itself. We physically interface to it, in which case we will become just another computer on the net.
And
that could be abused, by if the political classes want to. And we know that they have these malevolent. They could abuse that situation enormously.
I mean,
as Max Egan correctly points out.
How close do you think we are? How close do you actually think we are to that merge, if you will? I mean, we're extremely close in terms of technology, but I mean, let's face it. I mean, when is Frankenstein going to be created?
This is why I don't know. I mean, firstly, people would have to want to do it. I mean, they'd have to find some reason to want to do it, and of course, marketing and advertisers can make you want anything, can't they? I mean, there's an old Arabian proverb, actually. It predates the modern era by many centuries, but it says that if it ever became fashionable to make biscuits out of camel dung, most people would eat them. If you make it fashionable to be on Meta, people will go there. People will go there. Edward Albanese made it fashionable for women to smoke. Before 1920, women never smoked, but then Albanese came along and he started marketing cigarettes to women, and before you know it, there are more women smoking today than men. So yeah, if you can, they already know. I mean, they have the top psychologists in the world, and they've had them now for well over 100 years. They're experts at manipulating us on individual, on collective, on a cultural level. They really can.
Yeah. Need or bike. Yeah, that's exactly.
Oh, that's Gary Jones says something interesting. That the people they do require our cooperation, don't they? I mean, a lot of people, we can't be the only ones thinking, maybe this isn't such a good idea. Maybe we should think twice before we jump feet first into this. I mean, there's always going to be people who'll go, yeah. People will go along to get along, and but it only takes a small number of people to say no thanks, and that system will become unworkable.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take anywhere near a majority, just a large enough minority. So I personally have misgivings over this sort of thing. I wouldn't ever allow my brain to be connected to a machine.
Well, I mean, you look at something simple like a grocery store now being equipped with automatic checkout. You can self checkouts, and you still have people who will go, no, I prefer to go and talk with a cashier, interact with a cashier. It's like online, like shopping for groceries online, same thing. I don't feel that it's personal. I like to go in and see my produce. I like to go in there and see my cut of meat or the eggs or whatever else. Where people, most people now, because their lives are so busy, they don't care. They don't care as long as it shows up at their doorstep.
I suppose this is interesting you brought this up, Steve, because this very issue came up today in my life. I actually went to what you call a grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
We call it a supermarket.
Supermarket.
Or a grocery shop or something.
Mm-hmm.
They had automatic checkouts, and these were all cashless.
Yep.
It said card only, pointing towards it. And I went to the human cashier. There was only one human cashier, and he had quite a long queue behind him, which is good. And I just said to him, are these always going to be cashless now? Or do you have any plans to bring back the machines which take coins and notes? He says, no, I think they're all going to be cashless now. And I said, are you going to be here so I can talk to a person and pay with cash? Are you going to be? Are there any plans to get rid of you? And he said, no, there's no plans for this particular shop to go cashless. He didn't, obviously, I don't think he can comment on what the whole company will do.
No. He
said there's no plans for this particular to get rid of human cashiers. And I thought, thank goodness for that.
I think as much as these companies will go, well, look at this will cut, some of the losses down, they're still going to need human interaction. They really are. I mean, people demand it still.
Well, I think this whole agenda is coming up against its antithesis, which is why they brought in things like the you know what the disease and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming up against this antithesis. And funnily enough, when I was on a website for a cinema, I went to see a film a couple of weeks ago, and I always go and buy a ticket at the box office with cash.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's a couple of cinemas that don't let you do that anymore. The Curzon chains, you can't do that. You can order online or you can pay by card at the box office, but not with cash. And so I checked Odeon. Odeon was the cinema I went to, which is another major chain here in Britain. And I put in, they say put in a frequently asked questions, and among the frequently asked questions was, can I pay with cash at the cinema? And they said yes. There's only one branch of Odeon so far that doesn't take cash, and Odeon has like hundreds of cinemas across the country.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one branch that is cashless. We understand that some people cannot or do not wish to pay any other way except cash. And I thought, Ace, you obviously have had some customer feedback. And I'm not the only one who feels this way. Otherwise, they've obviously had more customer feedback that says the same thing that I'm saying. So that's good. So they say that cash payment at the box office will continue to be an option for the foreseeable future. And I think that's good.
What do you prefer, Alex?
I usually shop with card.
Shop with card. So
Yeah.
debit.
Yeah.
It's easier, isn't it? I mean, I
Yeah.
understand.
It is easier, and I don't need to carry a bulky wallet with cash, right? So, especially coins, because over here, I mean, they got the $2 coin, the dollar coin, and all these fucking coins. It's like, it's stupid.
Well, it's nothing wrong with shopping by card if you prefer that way.
Yeah.
However, I think I'd like the option to pay by cash if you choose to should always be there.
Yeah. That option should always remain, because it's not just for people like yourself, myself, or Steve, but I mean, there's a lot of older generations still around that just do not want to use the card, or don't know how, or don't feel comfortable using it. My in-laws are a great example of that. They prefer to use cash when they go out grocery shopping, just because that's what they've done their entire lives, right?
Yeah.
And they don't feel confident or secure, for lack of a better term, using something that they're not familiar with.
It's old habits die hard, and
Exactly.
The older people get, the more ingrained you get in your habits as you gain more experience through your life of using these sorts of things. And but I mean, there's a lot of I have seen propaganda from going back long before there was lots of cashless things about saying, oh, there was a big poster in a railway station I once saw saying coins get dropped, and they would say. They would say, why can't, there's a lot of negative propaganda. Why carry a massive amount of paper and metal around in your pocket? All you need is this little plastic card. And I understand why it is. It is actually easier to do that. I do understand that.
And that's the problem. You don't know your limit, though, too. Well, a lot of people don't understand what a limit is, especially with a card.
Well, you do have your payment apps these days actually do that for you. Some of them they'll actually give you a balance every time you pay. However, I personally like to have the feel of cash in my pocket. I'm self-employed, and I always ask my clients to pay me in cash. This isn't because I'm trying to escape the tax man or anything like that. It's just simply because once it's in my pocket, I don't bother to pay it in. I think I might as well just keep it there and then spend it, which I do. I have a savings account for any surplus, but I don't get a lot of that. Nobody does these days.
Oh yeah, but it even talking about that, or you look at a product or something that you've been buying for years, and then all of a sudden they change the packaging.
Yeah.
And there's this general outcry. Oh my God! If it's coffee, for instance, it doesn't taste the same. Because the package is different. They changed the formula. No, it's the same package. It's the same product inside. We haven't changed the product inside. Just the packaging's different.
This is what Bernays discovered. He was the pioneer of public relations.
Yeah.
He said you could get people to perceive different people to perceive the same thing in a different way by marketing it and advertising it in a different way.
Mm.
And literally, by changing the packet, by changing the way it was presented in advertisements, you could actually get different people to behave in different ways.
It's kind of like that subtle subliminal messaging kind of deal.
Yeah. So, for example, the TV dinner thing came out, and they were marketing these basically ready-made meals in plastic, in basic aluminium cartons, which they would then, someone could go and buy it from a shop and then take it home and just put it in the oven, and then you'd have your dinner ready. You wouldn't have to. It's basically ready-made meals, and they found they couldn't market. They found they couldn't market them, and then I don't know who it was. I can't remember. I think it was Anna Freud, or one of the Freud family came forward and said, "What you need to do is the people don't want this, especially the housewives. The housewives won't buy this because they're not giving anything to the family, and so they changed it very, very slightly. They say you add an egg to it. You buy this thing in an aluminium carton, take it home, but then you have to put an egg in as well. So the egg doesn't come with it. You buy the egg separately. And when that happened, sales of the TV dinners went up. And Freud was saying basically that the gift of an egg into the dinner was symbolic of the housewife or the mother putting her own contribution into the meal. And once she had that, all she needed was that little impetus, that little subconscious psychological spur, and suddenly there was no problem with the TV dinners anymore. It's very interesting how they did that. I think it's something very. I don't think it's ethical. I think it's manipulative. But there are obviously a lot of people around in positions of power in corporations, in governments, who don't care about that.
No, they don't.
If it works, they'll use it.
It happens on a daily basis. A lot of that, and people don't realize it. But hey, are the tables going to be turned though? Is AI going to be doing that to us overall?
That's the plot of so many science fiction stories, isn't it? It's funny how it hasn't turned out the way it was predicted. I mean, in science fiction, the AI is always some kind of it's some kind of super genius, isn't it? It's always some kind of incredible computer overlord. What it's turning out to be instead is something very, very different. It's controlling it in a much more subtle way. It clearly is not something that is just like a human, but better. It's something else. It's something almost alien.
Maybe it's learned over the years, Ben.
Maybe it's hiding its true nature. Yeah, but it is almost like it's almost communicating with AI is getting more and more like the people who try to communicate with other animal species, like the people who try to teach apes sign language, or they click and whistle at dolphins and things like that. All the people designed, like Carl Sagan, who designed like pictorial language for communicating with extraterrestrials. Dealing with AI is getting more and more like that.
Really?
Did you? There was an interview. It was Sam Harris and Dr. David Deutsch. Deutsch is an expert on AI, and it was very, very interesting because they were talking about this. They were talking about this very thing.
Wow.
And it's I can't remember all the details, but it's you can find it. You can find it on the Sam Harris website. I think I found it there.
I'll look into that. That's intriguing. That's intriguing, definitely. Now, what's the difference? Okay, so we're looking at artificial intelligence, but let's look at it from what makes it artificial? I mean, let's be realistic here. What makes it artificial? Why isn't it real intelligence?
I suppose because the theory is that it emerges from a synthetic process, which is electronics, which is made by the hardware is built by human hands and designed by human minds, and then they put in software, which of course is coded by humans and things like that. The thing is, what they've done is the AI is basically it's a software that then once it's been coded and once it's been created, it's put into the machine, and when it runs, it essentially develops on its own for its own ability to learn, rather than simply having to continuously having to be monitored by a human programmer. So that's why it's called artificial. But again, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know really.
Who's to say that this, artificial intelligence that we're dealing with, we'll say Loeb again. Who's to say it's not artificial but real intelligence? Something again that we have never sort of been able to sort of interact with before, and just finally found a vessel, maybe a vessel to to interact with us.
Yeah, this is a question we got to talk about. I mean, it is like Frankenstein's monster in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
although the monster in the story is essentially it has this human side to it, and it's able to it's something we could recognize, whereas this may be something that we can't yet define. It's obviously not. It's obviously something more than the sum of its parts. It's obviously something that's developed beyond the designer, the design that went into it originally.
Mm-hmm.
No one programmed, it could be that Super Composite is actually pulling a bit of a prank here, and actually she may have simply penned that particular image or created it through her own program, through her own coding. But so assuming she's telling the truth, and this thing just emerged out of the program, that's perfectly possible, because other images have like that. You see. There's that portrait of Rembrandt, the artist, the Dutch artist.
Mm-hmm.
He did many self-portraits. A lot of his images are simply pictures of himself in different poses, in different lighting conditions, and things like that. There's a computer program called the Next Rembrandt that created an image of him that was not by him, but it's a portrait of the artist Rembrandt. But it's in his style, and this thing created it completely independently. Once it had been given the instructions and the abilities of how to learn how to do it, it just did it. And there's also Deep Dream. Now, Deep Dream is very creepy indeed, if you want creepy computer art, because Deep Dream is actually quite simple. Yeah, it's from Deep Dream is actually quite simple.
Mm-hmm.
You just you show it some random images, and you give it some instructions to pick out what it thinks most looks like something. It's usually a dog is the example I use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what in this random image most looks like a dog? And then once it finds that, it then says, right, change it just a tiny little bit to make it look more dog-like. And then the computer then produces a new image where the dog-like element is a little bit more dog-like. Now, once you run that a few thousand times, literally dogs are appearing out of this random picture everywhere. And you could even run like artworks, famous artworks and anything through it. They run Mona Lisa through it. Of course, the most dog-like thing in that image is Lisa herself, and that's not an insult, it's just a fact. And so before you know it, after you run Mona Lisa through this Deep Dream software, 2 or 3 thousand times, and her face turns into the face of like a Labrador. Okay. And it's this is quite a simple program. It's a very simple program. Like I said, it's something that a child could do if you gave it to a 5-year-old kid and told it to spend 1 million years doing it, it could do it.
Yeah.
But it creates this really creepy kind of image. It's almost psychedelic.
But again, this is just you look at technology and how so advanced, even in many cases, much more than any of us really would even dream of, to be honest. And you can pretty much think of anything like, okay, here I have a fix for this, and something just totally you thought only you had to deal with, and then literally there are thousands upon thousands of other people that have to deal with this on a personal level, and yet there's something to fix it that they never thought there was anything to fix it with.
It's quite recent as well, isn't it? I mean, it's literally within a few years. I mean, you can go back less than a decade, and the world of electronics was a pale husk of what it is today.
I mean, it's were thought, look at, you can pretty much search the net now and find anything. Whereas before, okay, didn't find anything, but now you can think of the most absurd thing, and literally you could probably find it.
Yeah, it's fun sometimes to Google something completely random, and it's amazing how quickly you find something like it. I mean, the only thing now stopping you finding whatever you want online is deliberate censorship of certain subjects. That's the only thing now that gets in the way.
Well, yeah, exactly. And
Gary's right here. When we start awarding AI with ethical rights as being alive, I feel like we've crossed a Rubicon. If the question is, proving something is something other than yourself is conscious is extremely difficult because it's the old Cartesian principle. Your own consciousness is the only one true certainty in the universe. If you really want to get to the depths of philosophical skepticism, I think, therefore I am. It's the only thing we can be 100% certain of. Yet we can never. Judging another's consciousness is incredible. There's several tests that people can do. There's the spot test where they put a spot on you and you show them the reflection, and do they see the spot? Do they point to it and things like that? There's been experiments where they get AI bots to speak to each other, which is generally they just come out with some quite amusing jokes and things like that. But it's judging another as conscious is very, very difficult, Gary. It's very, very difficult. But if it ever turned out to be the case, then yes, you could know there'd be an ethical question concerning our use of them.
I just hold on a sec here. Just reading Luke. Wrote there saying that he had been to Mary Shelley's grave to try some paranormal stuff there.
Oh, really? Where's she buried?
Yeah, I've been to Mary Shelley grave. Friend, try some to try. I don't know. I'd like to know more about that.
She was very young when she wrote Frankenstein. And she'd been to one of the demonstrations of old Galvini, the Italian guy who could make corpses move by putting electric currents through them. And that actually, you could take young girls to things like that in those days. But yeah, but it's it's an interesting story, Frankenstein, isn't it? It's
Well, yeah, I mean, the moral, really. I mean, when you look at the moral of the story, most people don't realize what the moral of the story is, right?
What do you think it is?
The moral of Frankenstein? I put myself on basically, we're all monsters. We're all monsters, but yet I don't know. What's the moral? What's the moral of Frankenstein's story?
Don't fuck with other people's meat.
You could say that,
yeah, more or less. Yeah,
it could be. He became kind of like
I like that.
Yeah, he became kind of narcissistic. You know? Maybe it's Frankenstein is actually symbolic of our society. We're becoming we're becoming enchanted by our own abilities to the point where we've developed a lot of hubris.
It's certainly not that we're vain now.
And we are becoming like narcissistic and megalomaniac as a culture, as collectively. You know, we are becoming we are the kind of people who said God himself couldn't sink that ship. And then, of course, we get taught very bluntly. That's not put in our place.
It's scary how, much of society now, especially on social platforms, how they use the net and how they literally waste it. There's so much that you could, accomplish with the net. You could be so creative, create some really, really, really cool stuff, but yet people choose to be, as you say, narcissistic. Narcissism is like such a huge thing with people when they're my image. It's so important to me, and look at I must flaunt it.
It's very sad, and because of course there are people, and unfortunately I've had a lot of contact with these kinds of people
Mm-hmm.
who use this amazing gift of communication
Mm-hmm.
and they abuse it. And they dedicate a lot of energy and time and effort into
Mm.
abusing it because they use it basically to attack other people,
Yeah.
to try and harm other people, and they do it by through defamation of character, through abusing them online. Of course, you can always block people, but then they try to spread nasty rumors about you. They false flag your social media posts and things like this,
Mm.
and I find that baffling and dismaying. I don't understand how a person could spend their life on such a project of
Mm.
just mindless destruction, and then what they're going to do at the end of what they're going to do when they're lying on their deathbed and think, I
Look what I
achieved a lot, didn't
accomplished.
I? What I achieved a lot
Exactly.
in my life.
And
I've said this before. I'll say it again. This world needs an enema.
yeah. Yeah, more or less.
Yeah, I think
More or
so.
less.
And,
It's really too bad. Well, you know what? I think we'll end it there then.
oh God, have we got? My goodness, we've been going on. Time
Yeah.
flies when we're having fun, doesn't it?
Well, you know what? It was an intriguing conversation about AI and much more. And you know what, Ben, it's been a pleasure to have you on, and we'd absolutely love to have you back again in the
Oh,
future.
anytime.
Throw out your info there for everybody, where to find you, and here on YouTube and wherever else.
I have numerous platforms. I mean, the best way to find me is to search for Hapanwo. That's HPANWO. That stands for Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. If you find that, that's my main website. But I also have I've written some books: Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure, and it's 2 sequels. So if you like the kinds of things we talk about on this show, I think you'll like these books because and luckily, the you can still find those on when you search. The AI will allow you to seek those out. So do check them.
And yeah, well, hey, you know what we should do? If we can't get Ben to come over for the gathering here, we should have via video link.
Yeah,
Oh, I
video
love
link.
that, yeah.
Via satellite.
Yeah,
Via artificial intelligence link.
we're having a meetup here, October 21st next year.
Oh, I'd like to attend personally. I've always wanted to go to Canada or to the United States.
Yeah.
And Trevor's invited me over to see him, so maybe I'll get there. Maybe I'll be able to get there physically. If I can,
There you
I
go.
will.
There
If
you
not,
go. Keep it in mind. We'd love to have you. We'd love to have you.
I want to go to a Roswell as well, and places like that, Area 51 and stuff. And
there you go.
So that's what I want to do at some point, definitely.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you everybody for watching. And
Thanks,
again,
guys.
this is going to replay on New Visions Radio later on. So take care, everyone. Ben, take care.
Thanks very much, guys. Thanks for having me.
Good night.
Take care,
folks.
Ben.
Night.
Good night,
Night.
folks.